Welcome to the Generous Business Owner Podcast, where business owners gain inspiration and encouragement to live a legacy, not just leave one. And now your hosts, Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. My name is Jeff Thomas, and we have a very special guest with us today. My friend PJ Nardy is with us. PJ is the owner and co-CEO of Southeast Lineman Training Center. And if you don't know what that means, you will in a minute. I didn't know when I first heard lineman. What is this, NFL? What exactly are linemen? We're going to hear what that is. But PJ, welcome to the program.
Jeff, thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to meet you and to kind of join on this journey. Right, we're at this kind of juncture of how are we going to make an impact with the time that we've got left.
Yeah, we've had a chance to. We met at a conference, and we've had some follow-up calls, and we are kindred spirits on this journey together of how do we steward these businesses with generous hearts, and think about that and tell a few war stories and leave maybe some breadcrumbs for the next person on the journey. And so, PJ, as you know, we always try to start out with just a little bit of context. Where'd you grow up? What was your family like? If there's a faith story or any entrepreneurial inklings, young, what is little PJ running around doing, and where's he living?
Yeah, so I grew up in Boca Raton, Florida. It was a interesting place to grow up. It was kind of coming out of the old Florida into the hot spot for a lot of people moving down and starting businesses. Yeah. It was an interesting place to grow up in. Got a good perspective of the old, and then where it's gone today. Mother and father were high school sweethearts. Unfortunately, split at a young age. I think I was 5 or 6 years old. That was probably one of those big impactful things as a young child, and on the rest of your life, right? You tend to take a lot of that baggage with you throughout the rest of your life, but still no lack of love in the family. Mother was remarried soon after. So grew up in Catholic school, and families, were immigrants from Italy. So that Catholicism was strong in our family, although we didn't attend. I was at Catholic school. We didn't attend church regularly, which just wasn't something that we really was something of a priority at the time. Had a younger sister, and that kind of goes back to that, responsibility as a young child, right? You're looking after your sibling when your family's going through something tough. Yeah. So, that responsibility from a young age, when you don't know what to do with it, kind of sticks with you throughout your life, and you tend to, that and a healthy dose of Catholic guilt, we'll do a number
combo. Good 1-2 combo.
Thank you. Right. Yes. But I tell you what, that was foundational in my faith, right? I understood the blood sacrifice of Jesus. I just didn't know anything more than that, right? I had to work to continue to be right. And thankfully, later on was able to come to a relationship with the Lord and understand what that meant. But went on to college and found myself in by my sophomore year, kind of pigeonholed, like, hey, all my classes equal what? Okay, you're either going to med school, PT school, occupational therapy, whatever that is. Found myself going into occupational therapy. Went to occupational therapy school, and interesting enough, being a Florida boy and going to school in Florida, I really didn't travel outside of the state. There's a long way just to get out of the state of Florida.
Really?
But I had a chance encounter at a younger age with a migratory band by the name of the Grateful Dead, and that kind of opened my eyes up to, the last frontier of freedom and discovery. And so kind of wandered for a while, and really actually learned some really good lessons about entrepreneurship too. Learned how to make some t-shirts and go on tour and sell those t-shirts and, make enough money to keep going. It was something that was interesting in me. My stepfather was a entrepreneur in commodities business. My mother had a restaurant when we were in Florida. So they were both independent business owners. So that was kind of in me. Ironically, when I finished OT school, wanted to see a little bit, and ended up traveling the country for a number of months. Just packed up the car and traveled around the country. And what became 3 months, I found myself 3 years later, never working in OT, but always realizing that, hey, there's some cool places to see, and if I just put in hard work, I can start a life there, or stay there for a period of time. So that led me out to Telluride, Colorado, and then to Kauai, Hawaii.
Wait. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I have to. I'm trying to get this picture. Did you say? Are these the same story that you're following the Grateful Dead and traveling around and selling T-shirts, like bootleg T-shirts, or did you kind of have a little? Okay, you gotta break these stories down for me.
I'll
Sorry.
unpack that. Sure. So in 1995, the same year that I finished college, founding member of the Grateful Dead, Jerry Garcia, passes away.
Okay.
So now what do I, it was fun to be on tour, but you know what? There was a lot of cool places that I got a chance to see. So,
but were you just following as a fan, or were you on some?
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right.
No, just a fan.
Okay.
Just a fan,
and kind of making T-shirts and selling them at these things, like.
Occasionally, a lot of times I would work long enough to go see 3 or 4 shows, and then come home and have to go back to work, take a short vacation.
And like, what kind of jobs? This is not being an occupational therapist for a month, right?
So in OT school, it was to an extent, right? I'd be working, doing my clinicals with, at whatever job I had to do at that period of time.
Yeah.
Neonatal, could have been in geriatrics, could have been in anything. And when I had a break, if I get 3 or 4 days, I'd jump on the road
during school.
During school, and primarily through college.
Okay. So college, you're kind of following the dead a little bit. This is you kind of seeing what the world has to offer. Okay, so I got that.
Absolutely.
Okay. So then you graduate, you keep traveling. Is this what is happening?
So when I graduated, I really wanted to see the country, with an agenda of seeing shows and so forth. I just wanted to see what was out there. I was really drawn out west. Stumbled into Telluride, Colorado for a festival. I ended up a couple of years later meeting some friends that came in from Kauai, and
so you stayed for a couple of years.
Oh yeah, I stayed for a few years, and really established a great little life. It was a great community in Telluride. Let me back up a little bit. December 11th, 1994. My mother, who's kind of the matriarch of our faith in the family, had invited me to come to a church, and it was a non-denominational Christian church. And part of that whole wanderlust and that seeking was realizing what I was looking for wasn't going to be found in any of those places, but there was still a seeking, still was looking for something more. And so I got saved. It just made sense to me that I could have a relationship with God. And so I took that faith at a young age, but really didn't have a support system around me, right? I'm moving to these small towns, Telluride, Kauai. I met some great people that invited me to a small church there. It was great to, be with them. Ended up in San Diego, California, and had an opportunity to start in the golf industry. My father was an avid golfer with some good friends in it, and went to work in San Diego. Really got plugged into a great church down there, a great community. And after being there for a short period of time, I was pursued to be a sales rep for a company back in Hawaii. So I moved back to Hawaii. I was in Maui and traveled the islands for a year. But what is so cool is how just God had structured and oriented everything. Right? He'd given me the desires of my heart to travel. And my heart was, at this point, really wanted to become a husband and a father. And I just got really close with a small church, our pastor, who was a young father and husband, and really just did life with him. I'd do my day job. We'd go surf in the evenings. We'd go hang out, whatever it was. So God really gave me a cool blueprint of what that would look like. So I really had a great time. And then I asked the crazy question, because I was in Maui and I was there for good. I said, God, whatever you want, that's what I want. Well, it didn't take long for every company that I was working for in Hawaii to shut down, and sends me all the way back to Florida, which I was kind of kicking and screaming, but I'm like, you know what? I surrendered to you, not knowing what the plan was going to be, as we never do.
Right.
Ended up back in South Florida, started a sales rep company, right? I had multiple lines that I was a manufacturer's rep for, and was starting to grow that. I met my now wife through my mother, actually, as well.
Wow.
That's a crazy story. That's an encouragement for any single guy out there. And then
listen to mom.
Yes. Oh, she was unbelievable in that. That's a whole, we could do.
It's probably a whole nother podcast, but that's we're just going to sum it up. Listen to mom. She may have more of a clue than you think. Yeah.
And she's been praying harder than you have.
Yeah. Amen to that. That is very true.
So came back and we started the family. It was awesome. Everything that I was hoping for. Again, that entrepreneurial spirit kind of led me into an opportunity to buy that restaurant back. Remember the one I was telling you about at the beginning? My mother had a restaurant.
Yeah. What a tough business that is.
Yeah. You think that's part of the beauty of being young and naive, is that you don't realize
you're not encumbered by those thoughts.
No.
Yes.
No. So I've got the sales rep company going. I've got my wife with a child and a new one on the way. Why not buy a restaurant?
I got all the time in the world. This is gonna be great.
But I had some amazing counsel, some older, wise believers that were, that looked at everything with me, and they saw everything you could possibly see and said, PJ, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't do this. And looking back, it's all part of God's plan. Well, we purchased the restaurant in South Florida in July of 2007.
Wow.
Just months before the
wow. Ouch.
So invested everything we had into, buying the restaurant. And just a few short months later, I've got 31 employees at the restaurant who are looking at me like, hey, please don't shut down. Right. I mean, this is the only thing I've got going. We're in school or whatever, this is their livelihood. So I kind of just, bootstrapped and did everything I could. Go to the restaurant in the morning, open it up, go do my golf sales, come back home, have dinner, go to the restaurant, close it down. Sundays, get to church, sit down and get a text. Hey, I can't make it to work. Get the kids out of kids' church, go get dropped off at the restaurant, open it up and run it. Jeff, it was like hell on earth for us. It was tough on the family, a new family. But I'll never forget, this was a pivotal moment in my faith, and I think in my professional life. It was middle of the day. I was driving to see accounts, and I just went home, just full stressed out, adrenal fatigue. And I laid down on the couch, and I was in the middle of the day, like 2 p.m, and I'm just like, God, I can't even get up. I don't even know what to do. I don't know how this is all even sustaining right now. And I can honestly tell you, it's the only time I've ever heard the audible voice of the Lord. He just said, get up and start praising me now for what I'm going to do.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was amazing. Like I had to check myself. Like, did I just make that up? Am I just trying to force optimism? But I didn't. And I got up and I said a prayer and I put on a song and just tried to, realign my mind. But what's interesting is I look back at that, years past, and I realized that, God, when he gives us a promise, there's a space between the promise and the fulfillment of the promise where we become the person responsible enough to handle that promise, right?
Oh, baby.
So
good.
I didn't realize it. And we ended up luckily selling the restaurant and started rebuilding, our financial life. It was soon after that my brother-in-law had come to me and asked if we'd be interested in moving up to Chattanooga and partnering with him in Southeast Lineman Training Center. Yes.
All right. So before we get into that story, though, I mean, you gave us just a quick blow by of the pain. If you don't mind, let me just press on the spot for a moment, just because I know so many.
Do it.
All of us, somebody listening, a bunch of people are barely got themselves to the gym or whatever, or in their workout room, and they're on the treadmill going, man, I'm in the adrenal fatigue mode right now. And so I think we can all identify with the plopping on the couch at 2 p.m. just going, what in the world have I gotten myself into, over my head with. So I'm picturing this manufacturer's rep business and a restaurant in 2008 in the financial crisis when like nobody's spending any money. Okay. So maybe just expand on that a little bit, that period for you guys.
Yeah. Well, I think if you're a believer, it's the truth of the statement that, Jesus is never all you need until he's all you have. And at that moment, that's all I had. I mean, I was clinging on. Like I was, watching my wife who was having a really hard time because, she's just not getting the support that I had to give her. Again, if it wouldn't have been for, honestly, if it wouldn't have been for really seeking counsel, godly counsel, and knowing that, hey, listen, there's wisdom in a multitude of the counsel. Like I've prayed about this, we've prayed about this, we've sought it. I don't ever want to suppress ambition, but it's got to be done wisely, and it's got to be done with, with a lot of thought in mind. And we had all that. Sometimes we're just going to go through it because God is pruning us and shaping us to be responsible for things that he's got for us in the future. So it's not a time to give up. It's a time to persevere. It's a time to cling to the promise. It's a time to just really rely on him, which is what we're called to do, right? That's
all. You already kind of trying to figure out a way out of this hole. Like, what was kind of your state of mind? Like, just trying to survive day to day, or I mean, maybe that. But also, you talk about seeking counsel. Were you kind of talking to people about should I do something else? Where were you in the process, or did this voice kind of come out of nowhere for you to kind of maybe lift you up? How would you?
I was too deep in it to like.
Yeah, exactly.
Counsel. It was just do what's next in front of you.
Yeah.
Right. Like next thing I got to do is I've got to go close the restaurant.
Right.
Pray that we made some money and I can, and payroll's going to come through. But, I mean, I went to school for OT. Now I've got a restaurant. Now I'm trying to learn how to do, P&L statements to give to potential buyers. And I'm trying to figure out, had to get a beer and wine license, had to, establish credit with all the food providers. It was an education. I kind of look back and I say that I mean, that was literally my MBA.
Yeah.
I got my MBA, and that I wouldn't have been able to be where I am today if I hadn't gone through that difficult time.
Were you doing the manufacturer's rep and the restaurant at the same time?
Yes. Oh. Yes. I had sub reps in the golf industry. I had 31 employees at the restaurant. The good thing about South Florida, though, is during season, there's a lot of discretionary income. Okay. Right. You've got a lot of wealth that comes down out of the Northeast. So even though I saw, a pretty strong dip in golf sales, it was sustainable.
Got it. Because it was seasonal. Both businesses sound like a little bit. All right.
So you're feeding right back into the restaurant.
Yeah. Right. So, okay. You get this big word from the Lord, and I've had one of those in my life, that sounded audible. And I always tell people, we can debate the theology. You'll probably debate me on the theology, but I always kind of point to the story in the Bible about the blind guy who Jesus healed, and the Pharisees came to him and they're like, "What happened?" He's like, "Look, man, I don't know what you guys are worried about theologically. All I know is I was blind, and now it's like all I know is I heard it. I can't really explain the theology of that happening. I don't need to, but isn't that a beautiful thing? And to have that inspiration." That what did that feel like?
It was, well, at first, like it didn't change anything, right? The circumstances didn't change, which is all I was looking for. But it gave me hope. Like at that moment, I had no hope. I was thinking to myself, I am in a hopeless situation. Can I wait it out? I never had any thoughts of, hey, we're just going to file bankruptcy or we're going to do any. That was never an option. It was, call it stubbornness, call it whatever it was. I
just gut it out.
I'm just grinding through this. I've got to provide. I don't have there's no parachute to pull, so that when you have a family, it's a whole lot different than if you're single and you're starting something, right? But so there were no options. So I clung to that. It was what I needed. It wasn't manifested. You experienced it. I've been through a lot of tough times since then, but I've never had another word.
God told me to scale a business in this industry for His glory in 2010, and I didn't start a new company for 7 years. So it's like I tried to do it where I was planted, all kinds of fits and starts. I thought I had completely failed. So I identify with what you're talking about, the gap between the promise or the game plan. Like the big picture. Like, okay, here's what's gonna it will scale. And then I had a little conversation where he's like, no, I said, I don't know how to do it. Sounds amazing. Want to do it. Don't know how. And he's like, I'll do it. Give me the credit. And so I tried, I would fail. And I was like, and then finally now I see him doing it. And it's just amazing. But it gave me the same hope.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen right away. And I think that's key. Even if if somebody's listening to this, not everybody hears that word so audibly. But I think the hope is still available in the still small voice constantly. You have to believe those things. So anyway,
and you have to express your faith. I mean, one of the things that happened that we continue to do, we continued to tithe. It might not have been what it was before, and it's not what it is today, but we continue to tithe. I tried to let our employees at the restaurant know, where we stood, from our faith. They knew to an extent, but I committed to a couple of Compassion International kids and through the business and put them up on above the time clocks. When they were punching in and out, they'd read I was just trying to honor God in it. And he was more faithful than I was. I was laying there in the middle of the day, just collapsed. Take me now. Right.
But I heard one person say one time he had sort of a basement moment like that. He's like, Lord, take it all. He's like, I got nothing. But anyway, you can have all of it.
It's all yours.
Yeah.
But so let me back up a little bit. In 2000, my parents were spending some time up outside of Chattanooga in Rising Fawn, Georgia. My parents had met a gentleman who was traveling and training for the utility industry. Oh. And he saw a competitor of ours, a school that started up out in Idaho, and they started up training entry-level line workers. So my parents and this gentleman, bought 5 acres and a couple of poles, and they started putting a curriculum together for what became Southeast Lineman Training Center. Huh. So that's happening kind of, simultaneously, that growth while we're growing our business and hitting the hurdles that we were in South Florida. So kind of 2 things happening simultaneously in the family. Right. Mm-hmm. A couple years into the business, or about a year into the business, my sister and brother-in-law, who had graduated Auburn, had been asked to come in to run the business. That it was just making it. My parents still had to run their businesses to support the school as it was growing. And after we kind of dug out of the 2008 financial crisis, my brother-in-law had been calling me. He's like, hey, would you mind coming to some conferences with me, just helping me out? Like, we can't afford somebody full-time, so if you could travel with me in your downtimes, it'd be helpful. So I'd known enough about the business being in the family and started traveling with him. No thoughts outside of, I'd love to help you out.
Just help him out.
Yeah. And I did that for about a year and a half, I'd say, going to a conference every once in a while. It wasn't anything consistent. And 2010, he came down and asked me if I'd be interested in succeeding the business with him, buying the business and kind of taking it on. And he needed the help, wanted somebody who was going to be bought in with him, and somebody he could, trust and build and grow with. And it took us about a year to unwind, right? Because I'd already sold.
I was going to say, how do you get out of these 2 other active, super involved? Yeah.
Yeah. But I was all along, as a golf rep, you're building a great business, but you're not building anything that you could ever sell. Yeah. And that was the point of the restaurant on the side. I needed to build something I could turn around and make a profit on. And so we prayed through it for quite some time, wanted to raise our boys outside of South Florida. And we've got 2 boys. They're 15 and 17 now, Tanner and Tyler. Absolutely amazing. And we just wanted something different for them as well. So we moved up to Chattanooga in April of 2011. It was an interesting time. It was, moving your entire life out of Florida and telling, didn't work out last time, but trust me, this time it's going to be great.
This time will be different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
it always works. Yeah.
So we get here and it's about a month into it, and my stepfather and mother go through a big divorce in the middle of everything. So I told you it was going to be different. Yeah. So we're kind of, it was, if I can take the positives away from it, right? It drove David and I, my brother-in-law and I, to be, partners. It it was something that we suddenly were fighting for, right? We had lawyers that were trying to tear things apart and divide them up. We're trying to put together a plan to buy the business. There was just, it was tumultuous. It was just a crazy time.
So your mom and stepfather, really, did they own the whole thing?
They owned 90% of it,
okay.
95% of it.
So they were in control of it, and they're working in it every day?
Or not partially.
Okay.
Right. That's one of the reasons why David wanted me to come up there.
Right.
My stepfather was still doing the commodities business, and my mother was just a faithful servant, and being wherever she was needed. And unfortunately, that the circumstance hit, and thank God my sister and my wife were there to really help walk alongside her, along with the church. And David and I were kind of just caught in the middle of the crossfire of everything for years. I mean, it was another difficult time, but it was also a time that it forged David and I. It gave us some foundation, a partnership. You really don't know how good of a partnership you've got until you go through a difficult time.
Amen.
And ours started with a difficult time. And if it wasn't for a lot of things established that have gone to become foundational in our business at that point. We'd get in the morning because it's a little chaotic at the house in the morning, and get in, and we'd shut our doors for an hour and have our quiet time and just kind of pray for whatever that day was about to bring, because it was nothing that we'd planned for. And it's something that even to today we do, and our staff knows about, and our staff protects that time for us. And they bring us prayer requests. And it was just a good time that we were doing for ourselves. We were just doing to survive, the days. But it was also, a learning and growing experience. God was faithful. The school was still continuing to grow. Students were coming in. We were buying some more land to expand the campuses. And I was learning the business and growing in the business. It was, again, foundational in our relationship.
And you obviously were able to negotiate the purchase and control for, and what was the split of the business? Was it 50-50? How did it work?
So what ended up happening was we were structuring a generational skipping trust at the time to put the business in.
Okay.
And, to get the attorneys to realize that, once it's in the trust, David and I are the trustees, we have the full operating agreement, that we would be able to continue to take care of my mother. We would start the buyout on my stepfather's portion. I came into the business at, I think, 6%. David had 6%, or something along those lines.
Got it.
We continued to operate through those difficult times, and we survived it. We got to the point where we were able to buy the business out about 2017. We purchased the business, the land, and one of the things that was great about that partnership with my brother-in-law is I knew where he stood, he knew where I stood. We had an agreement from the beginning that if we're not both in agreement on something, we table it, and no questions asked, no harm done. Listen, we just don't agree. And I think if you get to a point, especially in partnerships, I love partnerships. I can't know everything. I can't see everything. I'm going to make a mistake. I want accountability. I know I need that. And we knew that we wanted to be equally yoked in this business. We wanted to have the same vision and desire. And as you establish that vision, and it becomes more clear, right? The options become fewer and the decisions become easier because you're all rowing in the same direction. So that was pretty remarkable to start to see, God work through the business, and it just started growing exponentially.
Do you think one of the keys, sorry to interrupt, do you think one of the keys to this, so there's two components here that are like flashing in my brain. Number one, well, look, one of my favorite lines is partnerships, while they can be amazing, are also are often the hardest ship to sail. Okay, so partnerships in general are not easy, even though can be very valuable. Add to that family. Okay, that has a level of complexity where, I mean, separating, you're still going to see each other at holidays. You know what I mean? Like it's hopefully. So that's a tough environment. And I'm wondering, in that environment, you get this partnership, it's with a family member. How important was your aligned faith, being equally yoked in this? How do you weight the importance of being equally yoked from a faith perspective in the success you guys have had?
I'm not saying God couldn't do it, but he did it only because of that, I think. We were unequally yoked to a point in that business about 2017. And from that point on, we trickled up into the right.
Because of your other partners until you guys had control. That's what you mean. You guys were
That's
always
exactly it.
Together, equally yoked, but you had other partners. And so it sounds like the thing really started growing when you guys got control and were equally.
That's it.
Okay.
That's it. So it was the original partner had been long gone from the business, early 2000s. So once, it was just David and I. That's when we started to see the.
Isn't that amazing?
It is. You can almost put a date on it. That we started to see things happen to the point of. So this is 2017, 2018. Business is growing, and one of the great things I think about the situation we found ourselves in is I would say there's kind of a forced humility, because we never worked in the trades. We don't have a tie back to it, right? So it's one of those things. It's like, well, if you don't have any experience in this, you ask a lot of dumb questions, but you also ask a lot of questions that people are like, well, I never thought about that.
Nobody ever thought to ask that.
Yeah, or thought to do that. And it also gives you a sense of faith and trust, right? You're hiring a controller or a CFO that knows so much more about the financials than you do. You're hiring trainers that know more about the industry than you do. So I didn't coin this, but I absolutely love it, because it's how our business operates. We're equal in importance, but different in performance. It takes the entire team to do what we're doing. And we could never say, yeah, it's because of all of our experience in this industry. It's because of this, because of that. It's applying godly principles, staying with them. If you don't believe in godly principles, well, I'm sorry. Biblical principles work whether you believe in them or not.
Okay, you can repeat that again, because I'm going to write it down. Equal in importance.
Okay. Equal in importance, but different in performance.
Yeah. And what does that mean?
So our trainers wouldn't have students to train if our admissions team wasn't continuing to help the students finish their applications. Our accounting team wouldn't be what they are without the students coming in. Our store, Elevated Gear wouldn't have the customers without. So we all contribute equally to, in performance.
You're valuing all the different roles as equally important, right?
100%.
Okay. Yeah.
100%.
That's really.
I couldn't. There's so many things that we couldn't do, that we just had to, in faith, had to trust the individuals, and that's leads to your hiring process, right? Because you're establishing your culture there, and that's one of the things I think we're most proud of, is the culture of our school and our business.
It's so good. And so did you bring some of these principles? I know you tried to put the compassion kids in the restaurant. What were you doing inside the business, just out of curiosity, maybe to bring that faith forward? And I love the quiet time praying, and they're bringing you prayer requests. I've never heard that before. I think that's awesome. What were other things that you tried to implement or try to implement?
Yeah, we were always looking at different ministries we could support, be it there were some adoption agencies that we'd supported. There were some other faith-based ministries that we'd supported. We had a lot of young men there at the school, young men and women.
Makes sense.
And you don't have an opportunity to get to know everybody as the school's growing. So we brought on a chaplain who is just sensational. He just walks around and kicks stones and builds relationships. And the church that he pastors has a welcoming dinner and a party for the students when they come in. And a lot of them have started attending his church. So we provide opportunities. I would say the other thing that we had done from a faith-based perspective was giving our students tools to be successful, not just in the trade, but in life. We developed something called Elevated Life. And Elevated Life is really, for lack of a better term, a discipleship, but we don't use those words. We teach these young men, if they want to be involved, there's opportunities to serve in the community. And we'll give you some ways to to kind of grow, we've got a financial literacy course for them.
Yeah.
And we also create opportunities for community, because I believe that if you focus on your faith, your family, your fitness, and your finances, you fill those buckets, you're going to have a successful life. And success is different to everybody. But if you don't have a faith, well, that's your faith. Like, dig into that. What does that mean? Because that's going to direct your moral compass.
Yeah.
Your family is your work family. It's your home life. It's whoever is in your immediate sphere, right? Your finances. You don't start taking care of the future today. What's that adage? When's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. Second best time is today, right?
Right.
So start investing in your future and your fitness. If you don't have health, you don't have anything. So just trying to create those principles. So those are some of the things that we were intentional about in having the business and being generous with our thoughts, our time, our resources. How can we be more impactful with the lives that we've been entrusted to have some stewardship and some influence over?
And one of the things I think is so interesting about your story at this point in time, and I love your transparency about the story all the way through, but also, you and I have been having these conversations before we started recording on, there's different stages of this thing. And, you're not 82 sitting, on the porch looking back at this. You're still kind of in the middle of this deal. Okay. And I know there's been some, new ownership, some private equity investment. You can talk maybe a little about that. And then maybe just talk about, okay, where that stands, and then kind of this new period you're in, because I think I think it's going to give people some confidence that we're all on this journey, man, and we don't all have it figured. There's not like a day that now I've got it all figured out. So anyway, maybe just share some more of that story.
I'll just tell you this, that to kind of give a foundation to it.
Yeah.
All right, we had, after going through this whole process, I recently was talking to a gentleman at a conference. Brilliant guy, brilliant. He's working in private equity, but a philosophy major from Ivy League school, and I was talking to him, and he was just telling me about businesses they're analyzing. I'm like, we've done a lot of work looking at private equity partnerships and so forth. I said, man, the biggest thing from my seat is that imposter syndrome. I'm sitting there and with the most insecurity in the world, because you just gave me a spreadsheet that I don't understand, that details everything about my business financially, numerically, and he just shook his head and looked at me. He says, "You want to know something? I've never owned and operated a business, so everything I'm telling you is
theoretical."
The same way. So we're like, hey, we should start a podcast, podcasters, because you can't be good at everything. You got to just do what you're good at. But let me give you a little context to how we got to where we are today. David and I knew that we needed a growth partner. We were being pursued by private equity in the 2018, 2019. And a good friend of ours, he was a good friend of mine, our kids grew up playing soccer together, Michael Tremaine, was, he saw me on the sidelines. I was pacing back and forth on the phone on a Sunday afternoon. He said, "What in the world's going on?"
Right.
I said, "Man, we're getting pursued by private equity. I don't know. Are they're going to try and buy us? Or are they going to put up a school right next to us? We have no idea." So he didn't know what we did. So he said, "Let me come down and just take a look." So he came down the next day, saw the students on the poles, was greeted by the staff who was, just overly gracious. And he looked through our numbers. They sat down. He goes, "You can't sell this. This is amazing. This is the craziest thing." I said, "Well, can you help us? Can you give us a little bit of direction as we're negotiating or just talking to private equity? We don't know where we're at or where we know where we want to be. We just want to continue to grow. We need a growth partner. We don't want to give away the business." So he was able to give us some time. And then, through a transition in his life, he became joined with Sovereign's Capital, and he was put over the lower middle market. Luke and Henry had really just started to look at that lower middle market. They'd been planning on it. They hadn't really made that first investment. And we were actually the first company in Sovereign's lower middle market fund. And it was an opportunity for us to work with, faith-based individuals who'd been in our shoes, who'd helped scale and grow businesses to the next level. And that's when we really saw a lot more growth. We had it within us. We just didn't know how to get there, right? And he saw the pieces and was able to help us, brought on a great operating partner. And we were able to start running the business, because all those areas that we were trying to manage, we didn't have a lot of experience in, were able to manage themselves or be managed by competent people. So another one of those, like we joined Sovereigns joined us in January of 2020, and then boom, COVID hits. But the fact that we were all in prayer and in thought and in intention together, Jeff, we literally grew the school throughout COVID.
Wow.
Most businesses were retracting or closing. We were actually seeing an increase in our in students coming to the school. So we worked, and this is really where we got the exposure to faith-based business, and that intersection of faith and business. We thought we were doing it all alone.
Right? Only ones who thought of that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or that there's, that we could be encouraged or be, chase ideas with other, other schools and other, not schools, but other businesses. And, to be honest with you, years ago, I remember starting our planning, like we had nothing, right? Everything we had was in the business, and people sitting down and telling us, hey, you want to start about, thinking about what you're going to give away when you get older. I'm like, give away? I don't have anything to give away right now. That's almost offensive to have these conversations, not realizing that there's going to be a point in your life where you are thinking about that forward stewardship. And that kind of led us to, David and I had been doing this for 13 years at the time. He'd been there for 20, almost 20. I'd been there 13 of it. And, we started to feel just a little bit of a tug on our hearts. It's like this, and it had to be from God, because anybody else looking on and be like, you have lost your mind. This business is up and to the right. It's growing. You're on a backlist.
Ride the train
for about a year.
Yeah,
dude. And I was like, David, I'm kind of feeling something different. I'm feeling, I don't know what it is, but I'd like to pursue it. What are your thoughts? He said, man, I'm feeling the same thing. The bigger you get, along with the older you get, you start to make some conservative decisions that may not be in the best interest of the growth of the business, but you also realize that you've got a majority of your wealth tied up in it, and you want to kind of diversify that. You don't want to be so leveraged. So we spoke with Sovereigns, and they said, well, let's just run a process and see what's going on out there. And we had some good friends here with investment bankers, and they took us to market, and it was overwhelming, the interest. Mm-hmm. We were taken back at it. We knew we had a great little thing going on, but we didn't think anybody else would see the value in it. And so we started our management meetings and met with 9 or 12 different PE firms. And the first one we met with ended up being, from the beginning, the one we wanted to settle with. There wasn't a compromise, and there was an alignment in values, morals, in the industry. It was again another answer to prayer. So that was we started that process last April, really expedited. They wanted to do a 30-day close, which would have closed us around the second week of December. Ended up trailing on into the first of the year. So we closed on a partnership with Warren Equity, and David and I still own a good percentage of the business. Sovereigns actually rolled some capital with us, so we told them, we're like, hey, we've done this together. Let's not see where this ends. Let's see where we can go with it. So it's been great. We've really grown up a great staff that is efficient and effective, and they want to do the best. Our business, I would say, is a little bit rigged. I think about this all the time, because a lot of people ask about our culture and ask about how our staff is as exceptional as they are. We all stack hands every day on helping our students starting into a career, like launching them out, and we celebrate their accomplishments, and we know how good it's about to be for them. They're going to have life changes. They're going to have
pretty tangible. It's pretty tangible.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And so it's so easy to stack hands on that and get behind it, as opposed to us just trying to grow our top line or trying to increase our personal wealth. That's a byproduct of doing the good work. It's can't be the goal. And so that's why I say our business is a little bit rigged in that way.
Fair enough. But still, all those things have to align. And so you find yourself in what, a 2-year contract now? Is that right?
Actually, we all stacked hands on, and this is no no knock on lawyers,
Yeah.
but we all stacked hands on some agreements. The lawyers came back with 1 year contracts, year to year. We're still owners. It was a 1 year, year to year employment agreement as co-CEOs, and we were pushing for a close, so we weren't going to argue. I mean, we're there, right?
Yeah.
So we're not trying to be. We're not trying to put a timeline on that. Whatever it is, my hands are open to whatever that looks like.
So how do you describe where your mind is now in this new season and going forward? Maybe what are the things you're learning and the things you're wrestling with? I just think it's so. I've really enjoyed our conversations about the wrestling. Can you just talk about where you stand now and what you're wrestling with?
So what I'm wrestling with right now is actually a sabbatical. I mean, I want to take time away from what I'm doing to look at what's next. I was really inspired through one of the podcasts you sent me in the book Halftime for Couples. And I'm using that in another book as kind of some guardrails to start to really intentionally seek what's next. We have this, we can have this ability to be doubtful, like, hey, this is I'll never be a part of anything this good again. I could never build something like this again. God, you'll never use me in these ways again. And it's a way of kind of lowering the standards of God's promises to our experiences. And that's what I'm trying to eliminate. I don't want that doubt. And it's amazing that it creeps in right in the middle of success. You're just like, oh, this will never happen again. Or this is like that. We all wrestle with that voice. I would say most, I can't say all. But now is a time of reevaluation and intentionality. I've got a couple years left with my boys in the house, and there's nothing more important to me than launching them out and to be, productive young men. My wife has put a lot of her desires and ambitions on hold to raise the family, and they're doing an amazing job. Started out homeschooling the boys and into, their school and high school. I'd love to support her in pursuing a dream or a desire that she may have. I don't know what it is, but I'm open-handed, and I'm intentional about seeking and praying for, what is next.
I just think I love that you shared that, because I know there's somebody driving in their car that's in that same spot. And I think what you talked about earlier is sort of embracing the unknown between, believing there's a promise, however that gets delivered, and the hope that God might provide, and your reality, whether that's in a great spot or not so great spot. There's that gap of the unknown. And I always picture like Moses. I always just assume he got wet before the water parted. We just don't like, hey, we're going to sell the company. Oh, now the next opportunity is perfectly in front of me. And I love the way I feel like you embrace the tension of the unknown with thankfulness about where you are, or just reality, or just, like pouring it out and asking God what the next thing is. And a lot of times, most of the time, I think it doesn't come on our timeline, and just embracing that. So is that kind of how you think about it? Like embracing the tension of that? How do you describe it?
I'll give you another biblical description. I got one hand on the boat and 2 feet on the water right now. I'm still holding on. I don't know.
Oh, that's good. Oh yeah. Like Peter walking on the water. Like,
exactly.
I'm not going to sink, right? I like that.
He's given us more than we could ever hope, think, or imagine. I think it's timing, right? I made a commitment to our partners. More importantly, I made a commitment to our staff, who've been with us through everything. I can only really start that next phase. I'm doing it now to an extent, but I can only really start that next phase when I know that I've done the best I can, and it's not that I'm not needed, but things are happening without me being there regularly. That's what I think my indicator. And if it's end of next year, some things are really lining up for us to bring in a COO starting next year, and as long as I don't know, I think it's going to be a slow migration, right? It'll start to be reducing hours and advising. And
listen, you've already been through this before. God's going to come through again with clarity. It's just going to be on his timeline. And I just love that how you're open-handed about it. And I just think that's just a great lesson for all of us.
One of the things that I did want to share with you, though, because we were talking about, it's a Generous Business Owner podcast. Yeah. One of the things that has been awesome through the business we've been able to do, the Chaplain, the Elevated Life, we have an opportunity through an organization called Never Thirst that we partner with in building wells in Africa, and we allow the students to do climb-a-thons and we match their climbs to get, so they're a part of this giving.
Yes.
We have a mission trip policy with our staff. We'll endorse mission trips and help them. We've introduced prayer in our leadership meetings years ago. It's ways that we want to let everyone know that, hey, listen, we're trying to keep our hands off of this business in a way that will allow God to keep his hands in it.
I love it. Thank you for sharing. Those are all actually very practical tips. And I know we're running short on time because we could go forever. But, PJ, we always try to wrap it up with somebody, so you've got quite a story and it continues, of course. But I'm just thinking of somebody kind of behind you on the journey. Maybe they're just starting to have some pretty meaningful success. Maybe the hockey stick is kind of starting to happen. And they're just thinking about, what is this generous business owner thing about? Like, what path am I going to? But where do I even start with this? What's just some practical tip that you might leave them with? Something they can just get up and do tomorrow?
Well, a good example is just practically like what we started when we bought the restaurant. We started with a Compassion International child and had that up and we shared the letters that they would, the correspondences.
I like that, actually.
I think any way that you can find a way to contribute to somebody else's well-being is generosity. There's somebody starting this journey that you're on, depending on where you are on it, you can be a benefit to them. Get out into the community with your staff and serve. Get an opportunity to, just to find somebody who's not in as good of a place as you are, and contribute to them, bettering themselves. We do a lot with our students and through our students, hoping to, be a good example. You can support organizations and circulate that information. But the reality is if you don't give something away, you're not creating space for God to backfill it, right? You're just in a situation where you're just continuing to gather and gather and gather, but you've got to pass that through so you have opportunities to gain more, to be a better steward with more.
I mean, I love it. Just start small. And I think one of the things that you really said there was kind of look at what's in your hand. You have linemen. Well, who do you serve? Who are your employees? I don't think you have to look too far and do that terribly much analysis. What's right in front of you that's an easy thing to do, and share it. And just see what God does with it, starting small. So
absolutely.
I love that.
And keep listening to this podcast, because every one of your guests has, like, I've jotted down what they've said at the very end,
Oh, it's so good. I learn every single week. I'm now addicted to doing this because I'm learning so much from everybody. So I'm just glad that you took the time to share with our listeners, the journey God's got you on. So thank you so much, PJ, for joining us today.
Jeff, thank you for having me. It's been an honor.
And thank you, everybody, for listening to this week's Generous Business Owner podcast. And share it with a friend. Follow us on your favorite platform. Check out our website. And we will see you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Generous Business Owner podcast with Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt. Make sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can find the guest contact information in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode.